thought that the introducer was going to give the talk. And I remember a time when that happened. We were holding a meeting in New York, a mass meeting, and I flew up from San Antonio to attend that meeting. And Mr. Gould was introducing me on radio. When he got through, I had to give an entirely different talk to the one I had prepared because he had finished my talk. So this afternoon we're going to talk to you about getting well. Now notice, there's not a word or a hint in that title about getting cured. There's no hint in there about being treated. Getting well means that it's something you're going to do. It's something you must do, because nobody else can do it for you. If what I've said to you and what Dr. Curcio has said to you during the past few days means anything at all to you, it means, among other things, that you build your own diseases, that you are the architect of your own miseries. And it means also that if you are to recover health, you're going to have to do it on your own steam. You are responsible for your illness, and you alone can be responsible for your recovery of health. Recovery of health is not something that somebody else does for you, nor is it something that somebody else does to you, but something you must do for yourself. Now this is true for the reason that you are the one who have done the things that have produced your troubles. And you are the one who must do those things that will produce your recovery. For example, your troubles are due to certain violations of the laws of life, as we have explained them here during the past few days. In your eating habits, in your working habits, in your sleeping habits, in your emotional habits, in your sexual habits, and in the various other features of your mode of living, you have violated the conditions of health, and you have thereby produced in yourself conditions of impaired health, or what we call disease. Now, inasmuch as the causes of your trouble lie in your own way of life, and inasmuch as you yourself are the only one who can live that life, you are the only one who can live in such a way as to restore you to health. I cannot sleep for you, and I cannot eat for you, and I cannot breathe for you, and I cannot rest for you, and I cannot exercise for you, and I can not emote for you, nor can I control you in such a way as to see that you don't do the things that you are doing that are hurtful. The causes of trouble may be summed up under two heads: sins of omission and sins of commission. In other words, there are many things you're doing that you should not do, and there are many things you're leaving undone that you should do. And I can neither do those things for you nor undo things for you. The things that you should do, you must do. And the things that you should not do, you must not do, not I. All I can do, all Dr. Curcio can do, all any other man can reasonably be expected to do for you is to teach you, to educate you, to guide you, to instruct you. It's from that point on, everything is in your hands. You either do or you don't. And if you do, you recover, and if you don't, you keep growing worse and worse until finally a gleeful undertaker handles the balance of the job. I know they're gleeful because undertaking brings in quite a little money. It's a very profitable profession. All healing is self-healing. The processes of repair are the ordinary processes of life or of living. They're the processes by which we are built and maintained. Sometimes they're slightly modified, as in inflammation. Inflammation is simply a modification of the ordinary process of circulation. Inflammation is a constructive process. It is a healing process. Fever is merely a little bit more of ordinary temperature of the body. It's a degree or 2 degrees or 3 degrees more of the same heat, produced in the same way. And the regulation of that heat so that you have a high temperature or a low temperature is done by the nervous system. Vomiting, which throws unwanted material or injurious material out of the stomach, is something you do. Diarrhea, which cleans out the digestive tract of unwanted and harmful material, is something that you do. All of these things are simply modifications of the ordinary activities of life. The healing process, all healing processes, are merely modifications of the regular, orderly functions and processes of living. And they're just as regular and just as orderly in their modified form as they are in what we term their normal form. But they are internal processes and operations that you do yourself. You as an organism do yourself. Nobody can do them for you. Your blood is purified not by taking something into your body, but by your own organs of elimination. If there's damaged tissue, that is healed by the ordinary processes of cell renewal and cell multiplication, so that you do it. Now, inasmuch as healing is something that each of us does for himself, and inasmuch as healing processes, restorative processes, are in continuous operation in our bodies, from the time the first deviation of normal takes place in that body, until it succeeds in restoring us to full health, or until we are dead, we get well or not, depending upon what we place in the way of those healing processes. They go on continuously. Why are they not always successful? Because we keep adding to the causes of our trouble. Why does the drunk man not sober up? Because he keeps drinking. Why does the person who is suffering from the effects of gluttony not overcome those effects? Because he continues his gluttonous indulgence. Why does the man who is suffering from a lack of sleep not overcome the effects of lack of sleep? Because he doesn't get enough sleep night after night. It is because we continue to produce our troubles day by day that the regular, orderly, and continuous processes of healing are unable to complete the work of recovery. We stand in our own way of recovery. We are the obstacles to full health. Oh, we do it ignorantly most of the time. Some of us do it in spite of the fact that we know better. Too many of us in the hygienic movement, in talking hygiene to others, are like the preacher who said, "Don't do as I do, do as I say." That makes a poor preacher, and it makes a poor hygienist. A preacher should be a model of the kind of morality he stands for. A hygienist should be a model of the kind of life he stands for. I mean that he should be a model of hygienic living. And more than that, he should be a model of the condition that hygienic living produces. When I look out over an audience of men and women who call themselves hygienists, and I see skinny ones and fat ones, I wonder why they don't live hygienically. If a person is fat, even though they're eating hygienically, they're still eating too much. If a person is skinny, even though he or she is eating hygienically, it means that they have not taken the trouble to restore their functioning power before they begin to eat hygienically. So they're not making proper use of their hygienic diet. All of this leads us up to this point. The first requisite of recovery of health is a very simple one. The first requisite of recovery is that of removing the cause or causes that have impaired and that are maintaining the impairment of our body. To think that you can recover health without removing the cause of your ill health is equivalent to imagining that you can sober up a drunk man while he continues to drink. It is like thinking you can remedy the tire following work or exercise while you continue to exercise. or that you can restore potency to a sensualist by a gland extract or something of the kind while he continues to practice sensuality. Then you can provide good digestion for a glutton while he continues to practice gluttony. It's impossible to remedy effects while causes are still in operation. Causes continue to produce effects, and as fast as the restorative processes of the body can repair damages, you produce more damages by the same causes. I remember many years ago when I was a younger fellow, let me put it that way, I was visiting in the store a friend of mine who owned a fruit and vegetable store. He had the finest foods in the world in his store, but they were for sale. By those foods he was like a physician I once knew, who when he was asked, "Doctor, when any member of your family is sick, you don't give them drugs, but when you're called to see patients, you give them drugs. Now why?" He said, "Drugs are for my patients, not for my family." This fellow's vegetables and fruits were for his customers, not for himself. There was a little restaurant, one of these small hash joints, right next door to him. And every noonday he would go into that restaurant and have a large bowl of chili. Some of you perhaps don't know what chili is. Chili is a Mexican word meaning pepper, and it's a very hot, fiery pepper at that. And what they call chili is a kind of soup or gruel made with an abundance of that chili pepper or pepper in it, and a lot of grease. And if they say chili con carne, that means chili with meat. A man from Chicago once came down to San Antonio in the summertime, and it was a rather hot day, and he was walking along the street, and he decided he'd like to have something cool to cool him off. So he looked up and he saw a sign, chili. He thought, well, now that's just what I need. So he went into the restaurant and he ordered chili. And the girl brought him a bowl of chili, and he took a spoonful of the chili into his mouth, and he sputtered and he coughed a bit, and he called the girl back and he said, "You made a mistake. I ordered chili." And she said, "Well, that's what I brought you." He said, "I thought it was a sample of hellfire." Well, now that's a kind of a mustard plaster, so to say, that he was putting on his stomach every day. And he was suffering. In addition to that, he'd get drunk every once in a while. He'd provide himself with 2 or 3 quarts of the best whiskey. He'd lock himself up in his room, and he'd get drunk, and he'd stay drunk as long as the whiskey lasted. Then he'd sober up, and maybe it would be some time before he'd drink again. But that was his way of handling himself. His whole mode of living involved a lot of very flagrant violations of the laws of life. On this particular evening, when he closed his store, we started walking together. For about 4 blocks we walked. When we came to the parting of the ways where he went north and I went south, and at the corner where we parted there was a drugstore. As we neared the drugstore, he says, "I've got to go in here and get something for my stomach. Now I know you wouldn't approve of it, but what can I do?" I said, "Well, now suppose we look at it this way. Suppose I take this finger of mine and put it on a block of wood and get a nice little hammer and come down on it with a hard blow and smash it, mangle the tissues and tear them and bruise them and cause it to bleed, break them and so forth. And now I put some salve on there and I wrap it up and I put it back on the block and I keep pounding. How long do you think it would take that finger to heal?" He said it never would. I said, "In spite of the salve?" "No." "What would you think of me if I did that?" "I'd think you were a fool." "Well," I said, "I think I would be too, but let's look at another fellow." I didn't say you. "Let's look at another fellow. Suppose I drink and I eat chili and I fill up with a lot of greasy, gooey dishes and I eat a lot of salt and I overeat and I abuse my stomach in every possible way until it's crying out for relief. And suppose then, instead of stopping the abuse as I did with my finger. I put some salve on my stomach and go on abusing it day after day. What would you think of that fellow? I'd think he was a very wise man, he said, as he went into the drugstore. That's the last time I ever saw him. Within a couple of weeks, a gleeful undertaker collected a big fat fee. Now, perhaps he would have died anyhow at this particular stage if he had given up his abuse. He may have already reached a stage where his pathology was irreversible. We do that. We get to a point where there is no possibility of return to health. You see it in cancer. You see it in tuberculosis. You see it in Bright's disease. You see it in diabetes. You see it in various nervous conditions. You see it in many conditions of the body where the pathology has evolved to such a point that there is no possibility of a return to health. Maybe he had already reached that stage by that particular evening, and maybe he hadn't. I do not know. But I do know that had he removed the causes of his suffering early enough, he would have returned to health. And he probably would have lived many years longer. I remember one time I was in New York City lecturing, and I drove up there by car, and I drove back, and I stopped at my home. I found my father in bed. He was 72 years old. He said, "Can you do anything for me?" My father had always opposed, from the time I bought my first copy of Physical Culture back in 1911. Mr. Gould says it was a tattered copy. Actually, I bought a new one off the newsstand. From that very day, right up until that time, my father had always opposed everything I stood for. He had been brought up in the old school. He believed in his medicines, as he called them. He believed in the pills and the powders and the potions and the poisons and the pukes and the purges of old school medicine. And when he got sick, he wanted real medicine. But now his old school had said to him, "We can't do anything for you. At the most, you have 6 months to live." 6 months. He said to me, "I'll do anything you say. I'm dying. I know it, and my physicians know it, and they say they can't do anything more." So I took him in my car, and I took him down to my place, and I cared for him. And he was a building contractor, and he had some jobs at home he had to go back and look after. So after a time he went home, and then later in the year he came back and went through another period of care. Now my father made a splendid progress under those 2 periods of care, but he wasn't willing to give up his habits of living and completely change his life. Nonetheless, he lacked 30 days reaching 80. In other words, he lived 8 years instead of 6 months. Very often, a few simple changes in our mode of living provides for more years of life, for more years of comfort, for more years of usefulness, for more years of happiness. And how easy it is to do this without making dope addicts of yourself. This man, too, may have lived for several years had he been willing to make the necessary changes in his way of life. But if a certain mode of conduct is producing certain troubles in our body, and we're unwilling to abandon that mode of conduct and adopt a better one, there is nothing that we can do except to accept the results, the natural, the necessary, and the inevitable results of that mode of conduct. It is now general knowledge. It has been well publicized. If there is anybody who doesn't know about it, it's because he is willingly ignorant. It is now general knowledge that cigarette smoking, and I don't think we should exclude tobacco and cigar smoking from that indictment also, is a big factor in the production of cancer of the lungs. Knowing that, why do we continue to smoke? Knowing that, why do physicians continue to smoke? Knowing that, why do chiropractors continue to smoke? osteopaths and naturopaths. Continue to smoke. A few years ago, I got a wire from a physician in Illinois. He says, I am landing at your airport at such and such a time. Please meet me. I met the plane. A man walked out of the plane with an assistant holding him so he wouldn't fall. And he had a cigarette in his mouth. And he came down the gangplank, and he was so weak we had to take him over to his seat and sit him down until I could get my car in to get him. The man was bleeding from the lungs. He brought along x-rays and clinical reports and everything of the kind from the examinations he had been through. The man had cancer of the lungs. He was a physician, a medical man. He had cancer of the lungs. I said, Doctor, why do you smoke? Smoking doesn't cause cancer, he says. I said, I don't believe anybody ever said it did. But they said it is a big factor. No disease, no matter how simple it is the result of only one cause. All so-called diseases are the complex effect of a number of correlated antecedents, and that's true of cancer as it is of a cold. There are many causes that contribute to the production of an effect. Many factors that constitute the cause, let us say. And cigarette smoking is only one factor, but it's a big factor. Yes, he said it probably is. And I said, Doctor, you know very well that nobody in this world can restore you to health. Why did you come down here? He said, I'm grasping at straws. Well, he waited too late to grasp at straws. He lived about 24 hours after he arrived there. He was a dying man when he left home. He'd been dying, as a matter of fact, for months. And all that time, with the knowledge of the effects or the office of cigarettes in producing cancer of the lungs, or in helping to produce it, he had continued to smoke. No thought of removing cause. You go to a physician, he examines you. Some of them are very thorough in their examination. They take a long time. They go give you many tests and many examinations. They go through it very thoroughly and very scientifically, and they're very careful about it. And they get through, they tell you you've got such and such wrong with you. Now what are you going to do? Take this pill. Or let me remove your tonsil. I remember a young woman that I was called to see a number of years ago. She was in a nursing home there in San Antonio. She had arthritis. And I think the only joint left in her body, the only movable joint, that could still move was her jaw. She could still talk and she could still eat. But all the other joints were stiffened up. Most of them, I think, were ankylosed already. The others were so tight that she couldn't move them. He gave me a story that started like this. I lived in Beaumont, Texas. I developed arthritis in one ankle. I went to a physician. He examined me and he said, you've got arthritis. We can't do anything for arthritis. If I had arthritis, I would go out to Denver to Dr. Tilden. What do you think she did? Here was an honest man. He wouldn't take her money. He wouldn't fool her with giving her treatments that he knew weren't of any value. He says, we can't do anything. If I had arthritis, I'd go to Dr. Tilden. He was a hygienist. What do you think she did? She went across the hall to another man. And he said, well, you've got arthritis. You got some abscessed teeth. We'll have to pull your teeth. So they took out her teeth. And then she developed arthritis in the other ankle. So she had it in two now. She went back and he said, well, we'll have to remove your tonsils. So they removed her tonsils. Then she developed arthritis in the hip joint. Now she had arthritis in three joints. So they discovered that the trouble now was in the appendix. She had an infected appendix. Well, out came the appendix. Other joints became involved. So one of the ovaries was infected. So they removed the ovary. The arthritis spread to other joints. And then it was that she came to San Antonio. In San Antonio, they discovered that the other ovary was infected. So they removed that one. And now they said to her, we have removed all of the causes of your trouble. We don't know why you don't get well. So, after a time in the hospital, while they put her into a nursing home where it was cheaper for her to stay, and it was in this condition that I found her. I didn't get her as a patient. She agreed to come. There was a painter painting the place that had seen her and had been under my care, and it urged her to call me in, and urged her to put herself under my care, and she says, I'll be over there tomorrow. Well, the nurse called in, the physician was giving her aspirins at intervals, and the two of them talked her out of coming. I don't know whether I could have done anything for her or not. She was pretty far advanced. Arthritis can get to that point where it's hopeless. But I'm not sure that she had reached that point. I think I'm very positive I could have gotten her to free of pain. Some of the joints may have loosened up so she could have used them. The ankylosed ones would have remained ankylosed. That I'm sure of. But nonetheless, I tell you this story to bring out the fact that causes are not even considered in the regular care of patients. Oh, they said we had removed the causes, but actually they had only removed organs and parts of organs. And organs are not the cause of disease. Parts of organs do not cause disease. Of course, from the medical standpoint, germs get into these teeth and tonsils, and they get into the body, and they get into the joints, and they cause trouble. But after they've already gotten into the joint, what's the use of removing the tonsils? What you have to do then, if you're going to get rid of those germs, is to remove the joint. And this poor woman, if they had undertaken to remove all of her affected joints, would have been left in a very pitiable condition. So, of course, the logical thing would have been to remove one joint from her neck. Imagine taking out organs. Why, they take you apart piece by piece and consign you to the surgical garbage pail in order to restore you to health. When they have converted you into a mass of scar tissue and a bundle of nerves, they tell you there's nothing wrong with you. You just imagine you're sick. You need a psychiatrist. If only they could have sent you to the psychiatrist to begin with. He wouldn't have done you any good, but he probably wouldn't have butchered you up so much. If only they could have understood at the outset that you just thought you were sick, that you just imagined you were sick, that all you needed was a change of climate. What you really needed was the removal of cause, and they removed your organs. That is the first step in the recovery of health, is remove cause. Now, what is the cause? I traced it for you here the other night. Immediately, the universal basic cause of disease is a toxic state of your body, resulting from checked elimination, which in turn results from a lowering of functioning power, what we call enervation, which in turn results from a mode of living that uses up energy in excess. So, we have to do, in order to remove cause, we've got to remove the toxic load. We've got to restore nerve energy, and we've got to correct the mode of living. Those are simple processes or procedures. Often they're not as simple as they seem on the surface. We get a hold of cases that we have great difficulty with in spite of this apparent simplicity of things. We get a hold of others that they get well so quickly that, well, we just don't make enough money out of them. I'm never going to get rich. I remember once being called in to see a patient. They were having an epidemic of hiccoughs in the East here, and I was in Washington, D.C., and I was called in to see a patient suffering with hiccoughs. And he'd been treated in New York, and then he'd come down to Washington. I went over to this place by a very simple process. I stopped the hiccoughs in about 5 minutes. No drugs. And I said, now, if it recurs, told the mother to repeat the same thing. The next morning I was supposed to go see him, and I went in about 9 o'clock to see him, and lo and behold, here he was going off to work. I said, how in heaven's name do you expect me to get rich if you get well so quick? Well, I'll never get rich, I know that. So I've already given up all hopes of the first million and started on the second. We restore nerve energy by, as I pointed out, by stopping the things that are wasting nerve energy, stopping all nerve leaks, and by resting in order to the recuperation of energy. We eliminate toxins. by restoring nerve energy, and by fasting to give the body an opportunity to catch up on its areas of expurgation. We correct the mode of living simply by educating our people into a correct way of life. So it's as simple as that. The second requisite of recovery is as simple as the first one. You come to me, or you go to Dr. Curcio, or Dr. Esser, Dr. Benish, Dr. Bassey here, or somebody else. He takes your cigarettes and throws them in the wastebasket. He breaks your coffee cup so you can't drink any more coffee. He smashes your bottle of alcohol over the bow of a ship. That's about the only thing I know that stuff is good for, is to christen the ship. And I don't know why they use it to christen ships. And he puts you to bed, and he stops you from eating, and you grumble and complain. You feel weak. You got a headache. Of course you got a headache. You just leave off your coffee and you'll have a headache. You stop taking your tobacco and you'll be nervous and irritable. And you'll get away from your alcohol and you'll have symptoms of alcoholic withdrawal. All your drugs that you're taken away from when you put on the fast result in withdrawal symptoms. Of course you have headaches, and of course you're irritable, and of course you're nervous, and of course you're sleepless, and of course you're tired, you're cranky and grouchy, and you're uncomfortable. It's not because you're not taking any food. A healthy person goes without food and doesn't miss it. I go very frequently without lunch and without dinner, and go in 2 or 3 days at a time without food. I work just the same, and I don't have any symptoms. But I'm not a drug addict. I'm not a coffee addict, and a salt addict, and a pepper addict, and a headache remedy addict. I don't take antacids and cathartics and laxatives and purgatives and drastics and things of that kind. I'm not constantly goading and pricking my organism with these things. So I don't have any withdrawal symptoms. But you do. I mean, if you've been taking these things, and he puts you on a fast, and you fast, your urine gets black, sometimes it looks like ink. And Dr. Curcio told you a case here that it was thick like puree of pea soup or something of the kind. I've seen stuff come up vomited after many days of fasting. It looked like puree of pea soup. It was so thick. It came from the liver. Heaven knows what comes out of the human body, what can come out of the human body during the course of a fast. I've actually seen stones come out of the lungs. I remember one case where 3 stones, 2 came out. One came out one day, the next day out came another. The third day out came a piece of metal. Looked like a filling out of a tooth, but the man couldn't remember ever swallowing or taking in the filling of his tooth or anything of the kind. I asked him if he'd ever been shot. He didn't remember ever being shot. He never was able to give me any clue as to how that piece of metal got into his lungs. Then the next day came out the last piece of metal, of stone, and these stones must have been formed around the metal, and the lungs healed up and everything was lovely. But it's amazing the things that come out of the body during the fast. You get cleaned out, you're thin, you're weak, you've gotten a good start on the road to health. Now you need something more. Your nerve energy is probably pretty well restored, you're pretty well cleaned out, and you've been for a time at least without your accustomed poisons, and without your gluttony and so on. Now you need something else. You need to build yourself up into a positive, vigorous state of health. You're more or less in a negative state now. You want to come up to a positive state. How are you going to do it? This is our second requisite of recovery. We must supply to the body in proper amounts and proportions and qualities all of the requisites of organic existence. Now, what does that mean? That means, of course, that you've got to have arsenic. You must have penicillin. Then you must have cortisone. And you must have some of the other poisons, like, some of the tranquilizers. Or are these the things that you live on? Are these the requisites of organic existence? Are these the things that life needs in order to build and to maintain an organism? Do you build bone out of arsenic? Do you build muscle out of penicillin? Do you build glandular structure out of cortisone? Do you build nervous structure out of tranquilizers? Of course not. We build our bodies with those same materials and those same influences that old Mother Nature has built, building and maintaining the animal and vegetable kingdoms from the beginning of life on this globe. She is still using the same ones with which to build them and maintain them, and she's going to go on using them as long as life lasts on this globe. I don't know how long that's going to be. If our politicians and diplomats have their way about it, it may not be long. We just need one atomic war, and that'll be the end of things. But at any rate, food, water, and air, and sunshine, and warmth, and cleanliness, and rest, and sleep, and exercise, and a wholesome mental attitude, a state of poise, of cheerfulness, of hopefulness, of courage, and of goodwill, and even of faith. Now, I said faith there. I didn't have any reference to faith in the theological sense. You people have many faiths theologically. I'm not going to try to say anything to you about your particular theological faith. Believe whatever you want to in that respect. That's none of my business. Faith in yourselves. Faith in the laws of nature. Faith in natural processes. Faith in the normal ways of life. You aren't going to follow them if you don't have faith in them. I never reach for the moon because I'm fully confident that I can't reach it. But a baby that doesn't know that it can't reach the moon will reach out and try to get it. Belief that we can do a thing helps us to try even if we fail. Confidence in hygienic way of life helps us to carry out that hygienic way of life. So we need faith in all of these things. Faith is just as normal a part of the human constitution as his liver. Doubt is equally a normal part of man's constitution. And without both of them, one to counterbalance the other, heaven knows what would become of us. So, with these things, we build and maintain a positive state of body and mind. But what do we use for food? We cannot build tissue, normal tissue, healthy tissue. We cannot maintain normal, healthy tissue with the wrong kind of food. With white flour. Not even if it's had vitamins added to it and minerals added to it, if it's been fortified and so forth. It still won't build it. As a matter of fact, a woman scientist in the University of California fed two groups of rats on white flour products. One group was fed on white flour products made from fortified white flour. And the other group was fed on white flour products made from unfortified white flour. The group fed on the fortified white flour died first. Both of them died because white flour will not sustain life. But the ones that got the fortified white flour died first. We can't build and maintain normal tissue on a diet made up of pasteurized and fermented and processed and refined and denatured and demineralized and devitaminized foods. It is essential that we eat whole foods. That it is essential that we not try the modern experiment of living on these refined foods and eating vitamins to supplement them. In the first place, the vitamins are no good. In the second place, they are defective in other ways than in their lack of vitamins. Take, for example, white flour. In the manufacture of white flour, 75% of the minerals of the wheat are taken out and thrown away. Or not exactly thrown away, they feed it to the cattle and the horses, and they have better health than we do. 75% of the minerals are discarded. Now, can you imagine supplementing that white flour with some synthetic vitamins and getting the minerals? Of course not. We need to eat foods that contain all of the essential ingredients needed in our bodies. And eat them in harmonious combinations, harmonious association, one element with the other, as old Mother Nature puts them up in her own food packages. You buy them in the store after they've been nicely processed in nice little boxes with beautiful labels and colored labels and wrapped in cellophane, and they look very nice on the outside. But they're too much like that book that John tells us about that he ate on the Isle of Patmos. He tells us that an angel came down and he had a book in his hand. And John asked him, "What is that book?" And he says, "Here, take it and eat it, and it'll be sweet in your mouth and bitter in your belly." John tells us that that's what happened. Now, this kind of a diet is very much like that book, with the addition of sugar and sauces and seasonings and colorings and flavorings and conditioners of various kinds. It can be made to appeal to your palate. But when it gets down below, that appeal is lost. The Department of the Interior can't make use of it. However good the cook may be able to make it taste, however acceptable to your palate it may be made by the cook, it's not acceptable to your tissues. Mr. Toronto made a remark to me the other day, the truth of which was quite apparent to me for a long time, that I want to bring out here again. He says, very few hygienists take exercise. It's an amazing thing that most hygienists imagine that if they just eat in a certain way, they can neglect the rest of their lives. Hygiene is a total approach to the problems of health, not a piecemeal approach. It is not a diet. It is a way of life. It is essential to good nutrition. It is essential to proper assimilation of food. It is essential to vigor that we have exercise. Now, if you're 106, you may slow down a little bit. I'm speaking of hygienists now. The conventional eater would have to slow down at an earlier age. But you still need exercise, daily exercise. And you need exercise for every part of your body, not just your jawbone. Of course, all of you get exercise chewing your food. I assume you do. Some people don't chew very well. We'll discuss that in a subsequent lecture, the importance of chewing. But we need daily exercise in order to build that vigor and functioning power that ought to be ours. We need exercise that sends our blood surging through our veins and our arteries like a mountain torrent. We need exercise that will expand our chests and cause us to breathe deeply, take in more and more oxygen. We need exercise that will remove the debris from all the hidden corners of our bodies. And we should have it daily. We're lazy. We're indolent. We plead that we haven't got time. There's an old story told about the devil and St. Peter. They got into an argument or into a discussion about who could mow the most wheat in the field. So they divided the wheat field in half and they went to work to see who could mow the most wheat, who could finish the field first. After a time, St. Peter sat down to sharpen his scythe, and the devil got ahead of him. He got up and he went to mowing, and with a sharp scythe he was soon ahead of the devil. And the minute he sat down, a little while, he sat down and started sharpening his scythe again, and the devil got ahead. And he got up with his sharp scythe, and he went back to cutting, and he was soon ahead of the devil. But he sat down to sharpen his scythe again, and again the devil got ahead. And he got up with his sharp scythe, and he went to work, and this time he was about to finish, and the devil saw he was going to finish ahead, and he said, "St. Peter, why don't you sharpen your scythe?" Well, Peter didn't have to anymore. He still had a sharp scythe, and the devil's scythe had not been sharpened yet, had just kept getting duller and duller and duller, and the poor old fellow, he could hardly cut any more wheat. Now, St. Peter, in sharpening his scythe, had taken time out from his activities to prepare his instrument for work. And that's what one of the things that exercise means to it. We don't have time not to take time to exercise. We can't afford not to take time for it. The man who hasn't time to take care of his health is just exactly like in the same position as the mechanic who hasn't time to take care of his tools. He soon doesn't have any tools, and you soon don't have any health. We must take time There'll be plenty of time to think about it, and plenty of time to wish we had taken time when we were lying in a sick bed, suffering, having a whole staff of people waiting on us and looking after us, holding their time to looking after us when they ought to be doing something constructive. Frankly, I'm going to be very honest with you this evening. I think that doctors and nurses are parasites. I include myself in that group. We're doing something that should not have to be done. We're doing something that if our people would live right and maintain themselves in health, would put us out of work. A healthy people doesn't need physicians. I believe Jesus is the first one who made that remark. It's still true, just as true now as it was in the day he said it. The healthy don't need a physician. That puts the emphasis where it belongs to. It puts the emphasis on health, on wholeness, on integrity. Let us take time to build and to maintain good health. And we need sunshine. I told you the other night about receiving a letter from a friend who was a professor of anatomy in one of our leading universities here, not too far away. He's teaching anatomy to medical and dental students. Every once in a while, the old fellow will go into the room and forget all about anatomy and give them a lecture on hygiene. But on this particular occasion, he wrote me a letter and he said, I've just come down off the roof where I've had 4 hours of sunbathing. Now that's too much. We need to exercise good sense in our application of all of these things. Get enough, but too much is harmful. If you must take a choice between little less than enough or too much, take a little less than enough. It'll hurt you less. We need daily sunshine. I know you don't get it in these smoky cities. I used to have my patients in New York City when I practiced. I'd go up on the roof of their apartment houses and take sun baths on the roof. In shorts and halters, they can do it. You can go out to the beach in many places. In the smaller towns, you can take sun baths in your backyard or even on your front lawn. It's always possible to get a sun bath. Let me see. There he is sitting back there in the back. There's the doctor back there that said he was out walking this morning and some thoughts were running through his mind and he said the old idea, where there's a will, there's a way, passed through his mind. And then he followed it up with the thought, where there isn't a will, there is weight. Perhaps I think he meant too much blubber. Where there is no will, there is weight. If you haven't will enough not to overeat, well, you put on too much unrendered lard on your frame. We need to exercise our intelligence following out a program of living, right living, neither to underdo nor to overdo in what we're doing. And that's true in sunbathing. We need daily amounts of rest and sleep that are sufficient to recuperate us from our daily wear and tear. It hardly makes any difference how hard we work if we get enough rest and sleep afterwards to fully recuperate before we begin working again. Hard work is not going to hurt you so much if you have your periods of rest and sleep and get enough of it. I do not believe in long hours of hard work. Today we believe in the 8-hour day. I'm fully convinced that the man who is doing heavy physical labor is injured when he does more than 3 hours of it in a day. We're coming to the 3-hour day sometime in the future. At the present time, we still worship the 8-hour day. How's that? Some industries have 7. That must be the banking industry. At any rate, let us see to it. In New York, I don't know how it is now there, but they used to have the saying among them, it is never late until 12 o'clock, and after that it is early. So they got to bed anywhere from 12 to 2 in the morning. They had to wake themselves up with an alarm clock. They couldn't wake up. After they got up, they had to have an eye-opener, or they couldn't dress themselves. You want to give me that glass of water? Here's another thing that we need. I mean water. This is a chlorine cocktail. Is that? He says he has a still. He can make us moonshine dew. But water is something that many of us take too much of. We have the idea that we must drink so many glasses of water a day. I saw a little primer recently that was for children in the schools. It's a health primer. And it showed in the picture a number of glasses sitting on a table. And the number of glasses there was the number of glasses of water the child should drink each day. If I remember correctly, there were 8 glasses. That's more than they used to say. They used to say 6 glasses a day. I remember when I was on the staff of the New York Evening Graphic a number of years back, I received a letter from a lady in Savannah, Georgia, telling me that the physician had prescribed for her boy 23 glasses of water a day. And she asked my view of it. And I wrote back and I said, I think that would be entirely too much trouble. If I were you, I'd take him down to the firehouse and have the boys turn the hose down his throat. Now, it's silly to tell anybody to drink so many glasses of water a day, because the amount of water we need varies with our age, with our condition, with our activities, with the climate, with the temperature, with the kind of food we eat. Some people get along all the time without drinking any water at all, because the food they eat contains in the form of juices, vegetable juices and fruit juice and so forth, all the water they need. Others get along with 1 or 2 glasses a day. Some take 1 or 2 glasses a week. You're perfectly safe in drinking according to thirst, providing it's genuine thirst. If you eat a lot of salt, there's an irritation of the stomach that you mistake for thirst. And you drink, and you drink, and you drink, and you still drink, and you're still thirsty, you're still irritable, your stomach is still irritated. You just can't get enough water to satisfy that fictional thirst, because it's not thirst. If that's the kind of a thirst you have, the best thing for you to do is grin and bear it. Your digestive secretions can take care of that thirst much better than water can, and in much quicker time, and without interfering with the process of digestion like the water will. Drink according to instinctive demand. I'll give you more about drinking when we come to discussing how to eat. Right now, I'm discussing primarily the elements of a healthy way of life, which are the necessities for building that positive state of health. What's that? All right, he says it's about time for questions and answers, and I've got just a few more words I want to say. I want to sum up, as a matter of fact. Our first requisite of recovery, then, is the removal of all causes, not part of them, all of them. I had a man say to me once, which is worse, overeating or cigarette smoking? I said the overeating probably is. Good. I'll smoke. I didn't tell him to smoke. I said between the 2 evils, the one is probably less evil than the other. But where there is truth in the world, we don't have to choose between 2 evils. We can choose truth and follow that. Here was a place where the man could have discarded both evils, and should have discarded both evils. So when we remove cause, let us look for all of the causes that are producing and maintaining the impairment of our organism, and remove and correct all of them. And then, having done that, let us supply the body with all of the requisites of normal life, all the requisites of organic existence, in proper quantities and qualities. And rest assured that if you haven't reached that point in your downward evolution, that is where you have reached the point of irreversibility, rest assured that you're going to go back to health as inevitably as you went down to sickness following the other program. It may be disappointingly slow sometimes, because some of you are in worse condition than you imagine yourselves to be. If you want to know how really bad you are, just go on a fast. I have people to come to me and say, I'm not very sick, I'm in pretty good condition. And then they go on a fast and they begin to realize what a terrible condition they really are in. They've been puttering so much with palliatives and keeping themselves comfortable by palliating their symptoms, and they have mistaken this state of palliation for a state of health, that they have not realized what their true condition is. But just let them do that. Now, sometimes it's disappointingly slow, but don't give up. Get on the right road and stay on it, and don't deviate from either to the right or to the left. Stay with it. It'll work. You'll regain health. You'll regain strength. And then you'll maintain it once you have gained it. Now let me say one more word. In getting well from any condition, it is not a straight rise. Let's suppose the top of that door there represents full health, and this platform that I'm standing on represents your particular condition of ill health. And you're going up from here to there. You're not going up in a straight line. You're going up in a wavy line. There are going to be ups and downs. There are going to be days when you're feeling good, weeks when you're feeling good. Then there are going to come crises. There are going to be times when you're feeling bad, and you say, I guess I'm on the wrong road anyhow. This may be all right for Mr. Smith, but it sure isn't good for Jones. But it is. You have the same physiological laws and the same physiological requirements that he has. And it is good for him. When you meet the physiological needs of your body, you have done all that can be done to build that body. And they're the same with you as they are with Jones and Smith. But you're going to have those ups and downs, and there's this hopeful thing about it. As you go further and further towards full health, the downs become less they dip down lower and become less frequent, and the ups go a little higher and they come closer together. Until after a while you reach full health where you level off, and there you can maintain full health for heaven alone knows how long, and heaven won't tell us. Now, you want to say anything before we start the question? All right.
Sorry to interrupt this wonderful, inspiring talk given by Dr. Shelton, but we have to leave time for the questions and answers. So, those of you who have any questions to ask, will you kindly raise your hand, and Dr. Shelton will answer them.
You know, he warned me that this thing is out of order, and I didn't talk him to it. Didn't he get... Did you hear what he said? It doesn't make any difference. It's all right?
We're picking it up on tape.
Okay. Here's your question first.
Dr. Shelton, you spoke about ankylosis of the joint. I think there are some people who may not know what that is.
An ankylosis of a joint is merely a case in which the joint has grown together. You've got a union of one bone with the other bone by the formation of new bone substance in there. All the joint structure is destroyed. All the synovial membranes and all the other membranes of the joint are destroyed. There isn't any possibility of restoring that joint. Even if you broke it, it'd simply go back together again, you'd still have an ankylosed joint. Now, your question.
How do we know what amount of restoration?
To begin sunbathing, you don't know what amount, because you don't know how much you can take safely and beneficially. So you begin very lightly. I start my people with 5 minutes on the front surface of the body and 5 minutes on the back surface of the body. I have them to increase that time of exposure 1 minute each day. That is, the first day it's 5 and 5, the second day it's 6 and 6, the third day it's 7 and 7, the fourth day it's 8 and 8, and so on until they reach 30 minutes on each side. I don't let them go beyond that. That makes a full hour of sunbathing, and that's ample. Anything beyond that may be considered too much. I make them take their sun bath in the early morning while it is still cool. If it is cloudy and the sun does not get out until it's hot, I have them to omit their sun bath. Or they may take sun baths on such days in the late afternoon, but the morning sunbathing is still better. Get it early when it's cool. Don't overdo it. Start lightly, and as you gain a little more tan and so forth, you can take a little more. But an hour is enough for anybody. Your question. Well, I would suggest that he have the teeth repaired first, because he's going to have difficulty with his salads and so forth after the fact, unless he does. Arthritis is a condition that grows out of toxemia, a toxic state of the body, which grows out of sex elimination, which grows out of a mode of living that uses up nerve energy in excess. In all cases of arthritis, we have a history, besides the innovating mode of living, we have a history of an excessive intake of starches, sugar. Arthritis is a condition that is quickly remediable in the early stages. Sometimes they get well so quick that it surprises both the patient and me. After they have advanced to a considerable extent and the joint involvement is great, several joints are involved, it sometimes takes a longer time. If ankylosis has occurred, there isn't any possibility of remedying that part of the trouble. But one may have an ankylosis in this knee and a very bad condition in this, This knee will recover, and of course the ankylosis remains. But arthritis is not a hopeless condition until it has been made so by abuse and mistreatment. All right, we have another condition. Another question, yes.
You don't advocate wash your back to Sunday, do you?
I don't see any objection to taking a bath after sunbathing. You do sweat very often, and I let my patients take a bath immediately.
You never mentioned anything about water packs. You know, that they don't do.
Packs?
Packs, yes. Water packs for reducing heat and stimulating circulation.
Well, in hygiene, we don't use hydrotherapy. In hygiene, we avoid all therapeutic measures. In hygiene, we're not trying to cure disease. I went through all of these things in my college days. I went through all of them in my after-college work in the various institutions I worked in. There are palliative procedures. You can relieve pain with them. You can reduce fever with them. You can do this, that, and the other, but you don't remove any cause. And you do, as I pointed out to you the first night here, you do enervate your patient. You do prolong the patient's trouble. The patient will get well at least 20% sooner if you leave those things out of the practice than if you include them.
Well, I aggravated myself doing it because I nursed about 6 or 7 people in my own family, and I was advised by hygienists, and I gave cheese packs and chicken packs so long that I just wore myself.
You enervated yourself along with the patient.
Yes.
This reminds me of a woman that came to me from Pittsburgh one time. She had attended the lectures of some of these peddlers that were put on these patent food shows instead of patent medicine shows. And he had come to Pittsburgh and given a series of lectures, and among other things, he was selling a juice machine. And she bought one out to get well. She was going to drink juice, and she was going to take that juicy way into heaven. She came down to San Antonio to me, and she said, Dr. Shelton, I exhausted myself in the kitchen making juices. There was a woman who needed rest, and they gave her work to do. There was a hand up over here. Why no salt? Well, didn't you hear Dr. Crescio's lecture the other night? I see. Salt is an inorganic substance, not usable by the body. An irritant, a poison. Do you realize that in some parts of China where they don't have other materials to commit suicide with, they do it with salt? Salt is a poison. Now, salt is not violently poisonous. You can take quite a bit of it without killing yourself. But you don't take it without hurting yourself. Salt is eliminated from the body with difficulty. So it accumulates in the body, and it's deposited out of the circulation in the cavities and under the skin, producing a condition that we know as hidden edema. A heavy salt eater will have so much bile under the skin that you can push into his skin there and you'll leave an indentation. That takes some time to fill out. Now, if he gets out and does a lot of heavy exercise and does a lot of sweating, he'll sweat it out and you'll get a lot of bile on his shirt. And when his shirt dries, you'll find a lot of streaks of salt along there. Because he's thrown out through the skin this accumulation of salt. It damages the kidneys, it irritates the nerves. All you have to do to find out what an irritant it is just take a few pinches of it, a few grains of it, and drop it into a cut. And this is a substance, Dr. Curcio calls it an antioxidant. We might also call it an embalming agent. As a matter of fact, the ancient Egyptians, in making their mummies, used salt in their embalming work. If you want to be embalmed while you still live, salt is a good agent to do it with. But aside from that, salting your food prevents you from tasting the fine, delicate flavors that old Mother Nature packs her foods with. So you never appreciate these things. You only get the salty taste. And that salty taste actually prevents your adaptive mechanism from fully adapting your digestive juices to the character of food that you take in. It interferes then with the process of digestion. All right, have we another question?
Doctor, what else is there on the next year to do of multiple sclerosis?
Of multiple sclerosis. I'm going to tell you about multiple sclerosis exclusively from the standpoint of my own experience with these cases. I've had considerable. I've had a few complete recoveries. I have had many cases that have been made useful again, although they did not make a complete recovery. And I've had a few cases that made absolutely no progress whatsoever. And I think the number that have made no progress would just about even up with a few that made complete recovery. Most of them make considerable improvement. I had one man in his 70s. After they make a certain amount of improvement, I give them work to do. And this fellow, I gave him a blackboard with colored crayons, colored chalk. And I had him with the arm that was most involved in the tremors. I had him doing drawing. And he got to the point where he could draw beautiful designs, look like Navajo blankets or rugs or something of that kind on the blackboard in colors. But he still did not make a complete recovery. Now that's been my experience with these cases. I've had a similar experience with Parkinson's disease, which also has a tremor and a helplessness. I've had cases of multiple sclerosis brought into my place on stretchers because they were unable to walk. And in 2, 3, 4 weeks they were walking. But they didn't make full recoveries. I had a man from down in Philadelphia a few years ago, an optometrist, who had given up his work as an optometrist and had somebody else running his office for him because of multiple sclerosis. He'd been under the care of the best neurologist. He had a father-in-law who was a very wealthy manufacturer and who paid for the care. He'd been under the care of the best neurologist in the East. And they told him from the beginning there wasn't much to be done, and finally they said there isn't anything we could do. Now all the time the father had been trying to get him down to my place, the father-in-law. Finally, when the neurologist said, well, there's nothing more to be done, then he consented to come down. He couldn't walk. We had to carry him in. He not only went out of there after only about 6 or 7 weeks, I don't remember the exact time, he not only walked out, but he went home and went back to practice. He continued living as I had told him to live and instructed him to live for about 1.5 years and continued practicing for that length of time. Then he quit and went back to conventional mode of living, smoking, to drinking, and to overeating and eating denatured foods and various other things, with his father-in-law and his wife fighting with him all the time about it, trying to prevent him from doing it, but he did it. So that in the course of 3 or 4 months he was back in bed again. And that is merely one example of what can be done in cases where full recovery is not possible. All right, have we another question? A blood count of 70? No, we'd consider that person dead. 70, you're thinking of a hemoglobin index of 70, I believe. Yes, that would be right on the borderline of anemia. I would say that the person was anemic. Well, we could bring that blood count up that hemoglobin index up to about 90 to 95 now, 98 in 2 weeks with fasting alone. Well, I believe most of it is evaporated and passes off in gas if you heat the water. Yes.
Why do dentists recommend salt for mouth and washing the mouth?
I think that ought to be a question that ought to be asked the dentist. But I have an idea they recommend it because salt is an antibiotic, as Dr. Curcio told you here the other evening. It does destroy bacterial life. And they are, like the medical boys, their medical partners in crime, perhaps I should say, they are engaged in killing bacteria. Their idea of restoring you to health is to kill something else. How's that? It's injurious to the gums, yes. It doesn't necessarily destroy them unless you go at it and... Pinworms are worms. They are not caused by anything. They're just worms that hatch from eggs. You get the pinworms, or the eggs of the pinworms, worms from some source, commonly in food or in water, and they find lodgment in the colons of children that have the catarrh state of the colon. If the child is in health, the pinworms are as helpless as a feather in a whirlwind, and you don't have any pinworms. If the child is not in health, the pinworms will take up a lodging there and start housekeeping. The best way to get rid of pinworms is to put the child on a fast.
Shelton, in view of the fact that the physiology of all people are the same, why is it that in some cases people cannot use, or seemingly not use dairy nuts as a source of protein, but seem to survive and thrive on dairy products or egg yolks? You mentioned that before.
The physiology of all people is the same. We're all built alike, we're constituted alike, we're constructed alike, we have the same digestive juices, we have the same type of circulation, we take in the same oxygen, we need the same water, we need all this, but our pathology is not always the same. In other words, our impairments are such that one can do one thing and another can't because of the impairment. So we have to adjust our methods of care to fit the different impairments. If there weren't any impairments, there wouldn't be any adjustment necessary, and you wouldn't need us. We could get jobs at honest labor and get corns and calluses on our hands. Yes? No, there are no such things as growing pains. Those pains are pathological symptoms. They're symptoms of rheumatism. They're symptoms of toxemia, actually, but call it rheumatism or whatever you want to. They are pathological signs and symptoms. They mean that there's something wrong. Pain produces no pain. Growing produces no pain. Yes? Same of all of them, yes. Parasites are helpless in the face of health. If you've got extra inhabitants in your digestive tract, it means that you have brought yourself down to that condition of health that makes it possible for them to live there.
How would you explain the time going up to normal during a fast?
I think it's very simple. I mentioned to you the other night, I don't believe you had arrived when I told them this, that the autopsy people that have died of progressive pernicious anemia, and they analyze their tissues and they find an abundance of iron stored in the tissues, but the patient was not manufacturing blood cells in spite of the presence of an abundance of iron. Now, they were not manufacturing blood cells because the toxic state of the body prevented the normal manufacture of blood cells. When we free the body of its toxic load, normal production of blood cells begins again. And soon the blood state is normal. All right, have we another question?
Is there any benefit from, nutritional benefit from the use of organic mineral salts?
Organic mineral salts. These are the only kind that have any nutritional benefit. And we get them out of our fruits and our vegetables and our nuts and all of the unrefined, unprocessed products of nature. If you mean extracts, these things are badly impaired in the process of extracting them. I wouldn't bother with them. They're not only high in price, they're not nearly as good as the mineral salts that you get out of an orange or an apple or a pear or a pecan or a cashew nut or some other fruit or vegetable.
Shelton, I don't mean to belabor the point that I made before, but it seems to me that since the nut is an essential part of the normal diet, and dairy products and egg yolks do not fit into this category, might it not be that nuts are not usable right away? That is, might require a length of time before the body will be able to use this form of protein.
Yeah, that is true. You keep these people on the nuts, see, even though they don't gain weight and strength right away. Keep them on there, and after a while they will make the adjustment so they can make use of them. It may take 6 months or 8 months or a year before they do it. I've seen it take 2 years. Now, I'm not in a position to keep people in my place that long. I don't have the necessary psychological qualifications to hold them there if they're not showing signs of progress. They want to get back home. They want to get back to their families. They want to get back to their work, to their responsibilities, or whatever else they want to get back to. So I'm in a position where I've got to do the most for them that I can in the short time that I have at my command. So I resort to the things that they can make use of. Now, after a time, give them cottage cheese, give them egg yolk, maybe for a week or 2 weeks, and then give them the nuts, and you'll find that they can go on with it. I don't think it's anything against the nut diet. It's against the nut that eats the diet, I should say.
Exactly what it means and annoys me too a little bit. Does that mean that the body must be in absolutely pure condition or whatever it is to be able to or is it because the nut is difficult to digest or it's not easily assimilable?
I don't think there's a difference in assimilability, but in digestibility. The digestion of a nut is a different process to that of most other proteins, and it takes a longer time. The secretion of digestive juices is different. And the strongest juice is poured out on the nut in the fourth hour of digestion, on the egg yolk in the second hour of digestion, on flesh food in the first hour of digestion. There is a different kind of a process. And it means that due to the particular impairment of the digestive system of this person, he is not able to properly digest the nut. In his particular condition, as soon as he improved, he takes the nuts as well as the next fellow. Yes? I think that Dr. Curcio feeds the watery foods, the more watery foods at the first part of the meal, and the less watery foods at the second part of the meal. And he has his reasons for this, and I think that we might say that at the present time, this particular form of eating is more or less in the experimental stage. It is just possible that Dr. Curcio has hit upon a valid principle, and it's just possible that when he gets it fully worked out, why we'll make it an integral part of the hygienic system. I'm in favor of letting Dr. Curcio go ahead with that idea and work it out thoroughly to see whether or not it has all the virtues that he thinks it has.
The fact that they don't line the stomach with sufficient greens before they eat causes all the trouble, and the fact that they forget about the supplements.
Well, I believe that's a slightly different idea, and I don't believe you line the stomach with food. Yeah. What is that now?
Is there much difference in eating the nuts in the butter form or the regular form?
Well, eating nuts in the butter form means that you're eating nuts that have undergone quite a bit of oxidation, which means you have lost a lot of food value. In addition to that, you eat them without chewing them, which means they don't digest so well. Nuts ought to be thoroughly chewed. They ought to be reduced to the milky stage. Now, nut butters are permissible for the fellow who has no teeth. If you've got a good set of teeth, eat the nuts. Now, we eat of many seeds. Nuts are seeds. Beans and peas are seeds. All the cereals are seeds. Sunflower seeds are good foods. Sesame seeds are good foods. Yes, if you go across the border down Mexico way, you'll find they eat hundreds of seeds that we don't know anything about. The stores are just full of packages of seeds of various kinds that they sell, and the people eat lots of different kinds of seeds down there. Seeds are all packages of food. There's just one little part of the seed that's the germ that's alive, and the rest of it is food for that plant at the time it germinates. But it's also food that you can make use of.
How do your patients who have no teeth get their vegetables down? Get any benefit from them?
I often have patients that I have to run their food through a blender. Now, when we do that, we have to blend it and take it right through them, have them take it right away to get as little oxidation as possible.
You mean like a soup form?
No, not soup. It's run through a blender and fed to them. It's almost a soup at that. It's a puree, more or less, let us say.
Is it true that if you have cereal, that it shouldn't cause the cereal to be so
No, sugar, on the contrary, causes the cereal to remain in the stomach longer, and sugar inhibits the action of the stomach, so that you have more likely to have fermentation with cereal and sugar than with cereal by itself. Somebody explained it differently, huh? You know, honey, if she's got 2 legs and beautiful blonde hair, she might be very good, but the other kind is no good at all. It's fun, wonderful food for the bees. It's a highly concentrated sugar containing an acid that the bees put in there to preserve it that interferes with its digestion. and it's not a good food for you. If you were a hard-working physical laborer working outside in hard work, and if you had no nervous condition and no kidney trouble and no catarrh, you might take a little honey, providing you took it right. But how do you take honey? On your flapjacks or on your bread, which means you're wrong combinations. If you ate it on a stalk of celery or on a leaf of lettuce, it wouldn't be badly combined. And it doesn't taste bad that way either. Yes, but not with other foods. Just
I just wanted to ask you if there's any validity to some people expressing a thought for the conventional, let's say, man-specific way of life, conventional life, to gradually get away from the meats and the things that are consumed, or go off into roughly.
Well, now let me ask you this question. If you had a man that was a habitual liar, and you wanted him to stop lying, would you ask him to gradually quit or to cut it out?
I'm talking this is about the withdrawal pain, and just in order in conjunction with the nut. Something is wrong with the body, and the body can digest good food.
You're quite right, but it makes a more speedy and more satisfactory adjustment if you quit these evil things immediately than it does if you prolong them. And one of the troubles with this tapering off program is that you taper off to a certain point and you start tapering on again. You don't really carry it out. Your question over there. I don't know of any reason why you cannot take 2 nuts at the same meal. And, well, I said 2 or more. Yes, you can take 2 or more. So far as I know, I don't know of any reason why you can't. But I don't think there is enough difference in nuts. Now, I know there are differences in composition. Some of them contain considerably more protein than others. But I mean, I don't think that there's enough difference in them for us to split hairs over which is the best nut. Nobody's going to live on one nut unless he's a genuine nut himself. You're going to live on a variety of nuts. So take those you like today and those you like tomorrow and the next day. All the nuts, as far as I know, are acid-forming, if that's what you mean. I don't know of any reason why you can't eat acid-forming food so long as you don't eat them to excess. Don't use palliatives. Don't use palliatives. Don't use them at all.